Essentially, there's a debt crisis, and there's a whole lot of politics around this so-called debt crisis. Now, the first question you've got to ask around that is, is that actually a crisis? Is it a crisis if you basically need to spend only what you earn?
Hi, welcome to Flipside, an alternative news resource. I'm Dee McLaughlin, and I'm usually behind the camera. I don't particularly want to be in front of it, but I am so full of the BS that we get from mainstream media and their inability to discuss the real questions that I feel we all need to speak out. So over the next few months, I'm going to interview some very interesting guests and try get to the real issues and what's really happening around us. My first guest is Greg Buck, and he's going to be a regular on the show called The Buck Stops Here. And I asked him about the US debt and the printing of $85 billion a month and how that affects us here in Australia.
So the United States basically does not need to produce any goods and services or do any work in order to get money in order to buy things. They can just print it because people trade in their currency. So they print money and they buy goods and services for that money. And basically, the United States is currently spending $3 for every $2 that it earns. So the United States earns money from exporting technology, software, weapons, whatever you like, mainly weapons and bombs and things, but all the money that they earn from their activities covers approximately 60% of their spending bill. So every single day of every single week of every single year, they are spending $3 for every $2 that they actually earn. And the difference is made up by printing money out of thin air and paying for their debt with this printed money. So what does default mean in that context? If we don't increase the debt ceiling, we're going to default on our debt. If we can't borrow more money from the people to whom we owe the money in order to pay the interest on the money we borrowed from them last time, then we're going to default. My argument would be we're already defaulting because there is no prospect that they're ever going to pay any of this debt back. The United States has never paid a debt back, ever. Never. Back before, after the Second World War, with the new financial monetary arrangements and Bretton Woods and so on, there was a gold standard. And in 1972, under Nixon, they broke away from the gold standard. Why did they break from the gold standard? They broke away from the gold standard because the gold standard required them to pay for their debts in gold. They couldn't do that anymore because they didn't have enough gold. So they defaulted on their debt and said, no, we're not going to pay for the debt in gold anymore. We're going to pay for it in little pieces of paper. If you have a political system, which is what we now have, where today's politicians can promise spending and money to today's voters that the next generation is going to have to pay for, what's to stop them doing it? Soon after the gold standard disappeared, there was still pretty much a generation of politicians around who had thrift in their minds, who remembered the Great Depression, who remembered what financial bubbles do, who believed in saving and being responsible and so on. And this is why, for a period of time after, even though the shackles were taken off the financial system, the system still worked without huge increases in debt. But it didn't take long. After about 1980, in the 1980s and 1990s, the shackles came off completely. You saw all the lobbying and the politicians and the bankers all getting together and coming up with this new system which allowed the unlimited creation of credit. Completely unlimited, which is where we are now.
And so how does that affect us in the suburbs in Australia?
How is it going to affect us? At the moment, how it affects us in the suburbs in Australia is that asset prices have gone through the roof. We've got a world now where everyone thinks that very low interest rates are a good thing. That's become the mantra. Lower interest rates under us, lower interest rates under us. What does lower interest rates actually mean? It means nobody must save. That's the signal. That's the monetary signal. Don't bother saving. Why save? You're not going to get anything for your savings. So what are you going to do? What does everyone do? You're going to speculate. In other words, you don't get rewarded for productive investment, taking proper risks, saving, being prudent, all the things that used to apparently be a good thing. Now what you get rewarded for is borrow, 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 and spend, spend, spend. That's what you got to do. So that's where all the action is. That is why asset prices are all going up, because interest rates are zero. That is why companies can issue bonds and everything for hardly any interest, because no one can get any money in the bank anymore, because interest rates are zero or even negative real interest rates. So what happens is, when this asset speculation is the name of the game, which is why we see the Dow Jones going up as the economy goes down, which is why we see real estate prices booming everywhere, which is why we see everyone buying land and buying assets everywhere, right? And this is what you alluded to. Because we now live in a globalized world, foreign corporations and foreign companies are in the same position everywhere they look. This is the first time it's ever happened. Everywhere you look, interest rates are zero. So what's everyone going to do with all this money? They're going to buy assets. And where are they going to buy assets? There's all this money chasing assets, all this paper money, all this rubbish chasing assets. They're going to buy their assets where they can buy their assets. They're going to buy them where they're allowed to buy them. They're going to buy Australian farmland. They're going to buy Australian real estate. They're doing it in the UK. They're doing it in the US. The whole West is being overrun by all this paper money chasing all these assets.
Paper money chasing all these assets. Well, is Australia open for business, or is it just up for sale? Well, fortunately, last week, Joe Hockey rejected the $3.4 billion sale of GrainCorp to Archer Daniels Midland. And the Nationals probably bullied him into that, and the Greens supported that, but Labour thought otherwise. And I find it extraordinary that Chris Bowen and Penny Wong would support the sale of Australia's breadbasket to a foreign and rather dubious corporation. So who are ADM?
It's like a modern-day version of the parable about the loaves and the fishes.
Although they come across with biblical intentions, they are one of the largest agribusinesses in the world, operating in over 75 countries. But how have they got so big? This is a company that does not want to operate on a level playing field and have been major recipients of corporate welfare, having had huge subsidy payouts for some of their crops. But they have also made money out of criminal activity. And ADM was convicted of some of the most egregious corporate crimes in US history, sending 3 of their top execs to prison in 1999. Had ADM done things slightly differently, Hockey might well have approved the deal. But you can be sure these huge agribusinesses have their eyes on Australia and are planning in secret deals to their advantage in the secret Trans-Pacific Partnership. It is, of course, a huge concern that there are only a handful of these huge corporations controlling more and more of the agribusiness. So you could say that companies like ADM, DuPont, John Deere, Monsanto are collaborating or even colluding to gain more control over our global food supplies. These giants will do anything, even write their own laws to gain advantage, as demonstrated in the Monsanto Protection Act. But where and how is all this investment coming from? So is Greg Buck right when he says foreign companies are coming to Australia and buying our assets just for paper money that was just made out of thin air?
You invite the foreigners in now. Now you've got a bit of a bigger market.
They have more paper than us.
They've got more paper. They've got more paper. And actually in Australia, if you as a citizen in Australia want to get your hands on dollars, you've got to work.
So what happens to the $85 billion of money that's being produced by the Fed and injected into the economy every month? Well, the president of the Federal Reserve in Dallas admits that recent gains in the stock market are the result of the artificial manipulation of the US central bank. He says the continuous inflow of money by the Fed is the primary causation of the 30% rally in stocks, and ADMs went up from 26 to 42 in 1 year. So what is really happening here? Are these giant corporations operating in a kind of sophisticated Ponzi scheme that gives them financial gain and financial advantage so that they can go off and buy assets globally.
And the irony of it is, the incredible irony of it is, to me, is that Australians, here we are in Australia, we think we are so clever in Australia that what we are basically doing is we've got sky high real estate prices and sky high asset prices, and these are being driven by nothing but debt and by foreigners giving us pieces of paper and getting our land and our houses in return. There will come a time in the not too distant future where we're going to wake up and wonder what the hell we were doing. But the West have got themselves into such a pickle because of the amount of debt. It's desperation. It's like the final throes of something's gone terribly wrong, and the only way we can keep our system going is by pushing up asset prices, just continually pushing them up, because as soon as they stop going up, the party's over and the whole thing's going to collapse. And the only way for them to keep on going up anymore now, because locally everyone is up to their eyeballs in debt, is to start inviting all the foreigners in. Yeah?
Well, I hope you enjoyed the program, and next time we're going to bring you the fraudulent war on terror, maybe smart meters, Murdoch Press, anything that requires and needs focus. So share, subscribe, and watch us next time. Thanks. The Murdoch Press and all the other mainstream media have crushed the debate. It's shameful that our politicians have towed the line and everyone is complicit to the crimes of 9/11.